I want you to think about the last time you bought something on sale online.
Oh, I'm sure everyone has done this recently.
Right. I mean, you see that bright red slash through the original price, the big, bold percentage off.
Yep.
And you probably felt that little rush of victory, like you beat the system.
You scored a deal.
Exactly. You scored a deal. But I want you to ask yourself, did you actually save money? Or was that sale just a, a carefully constructed illusion?
A psychological anchor.
Yes, a psychological anchor designed entirely just to make you open your wallet.
It is a profound question, and it really sits at the very heart of modern consumer psychology.
Yeah.
Because as shoppers, we are deeply conditioned to respond to discounts. But we rarely step back to ask if the baseline price we're comparing against was ever real to begin with.
They just take it at face value.
Precisely. We anchor to the highest number we see, and we assume any deviation from it is a genuine bargain.
And that dynamic is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We are looking at a recent highly detailed interview transcript with Theo Velmus.
The founder of Cannabis Deals US.
Right. And he and his team have built something entirely new for the industry, which is the Cannabis Deals US Cannabis Price Index.
And I think the timing of this data drop is crucial. Just to set the context, today is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026.
Wow, already.
Right. And this specific index has been continuously tracking market data since December of 2025.
So we have months of data now.
Exactly. What that gives us is a multi-month, real-time snapshot of an evolving, incredibly complex market that has historically just operated in the dark.
Now, tracking the scope of this is wild to me. It's over 20,000 individual products live across dozens of different licensed U.S. merchants.
It's massive.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare, honestly. They're tracking CBD oils, THC flower, vape cartridges, edibles, capsules.
Even ancillary hardware like vaporizers.
Right, all of it. In a market this geographically fragmented, how is this index actually pulling that off without just capturing a bunch of useless noise?
Well, that is the exact problem Velmus was trying to solve. Because in traditional retail, say groceries or electronics, you have standardized barcodes.
Oh, sure.
You have national distributors and syndicated data platforms like Nielsen that track every single scan at a register.
The infrastructure is just there.
But the cannabis industry lacks that infrastructure. Because of the complex web of state-by-state regulations and, of course, the absence of federal banking frameworks, data has historically been siloed.
All over the place.
Exactly. So what this index does is it programmatically scrapes and normalizes live online retail menus.
Oh, wow.
It captures pricing and discount data across compliant, licensed merchants. It essentially builds a unified data layer over a fundamentally disjointed market.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the most critical distinction Velmus makes in his interview, the thing that really cracks this whole pricing illusion wide open, is the difference between the list price and the effective price.
What's fascinating here is that cannabis retail pricing, much like traditional apparel or automotive sales, is heavily driven by discounting rather than actual structural changes to the list price.
So they just leave the sticker price alone?
They do. Retailers intentionally keep those list prices stable. They want the baseline to look premium.
Right.
But they don't actually expect the savvy consumer to pay that high price all the time. Instead, they use temporary, targeted discounts to move aging inventory, attract new customers, or respond dynamically to local market pressure.
It's all game of margins.
It is entirely about preserving pricing flexibility.
I have to admit, I fell for this exact mechanic just last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was looking at a high-end CBD tincture online. The site said it was normally $80, but for today only it was marked down to $40. I felt like a genius adding it to my cart. But reading through the index data, I realized I wasn't getting the steal of the century at all. I was probably just paying the actual market clearing price.
Exactly. You were paying the effective price. Because think about it. If the retailer permanently lowered the price of that tincture to $40, they would lose their psychological leverage.
The perceived value just drops.
Right. Plus, if their supply costs suddenly spike next month, it is much harder to raise a baseline price from 40 back to 80 than it is to simply stop offering a 50% off promo code.
Oh, that makes total sense.
By maintaining a high list price, the sticker price becomes merely a starting point. It's a fiction designed to facilitate the illusion of a discount.
But Velmus points out that if you are only looking at the sticker price, you are entirely blind to the actual economics of the market.
Completely blind.
And the data they've collected illustrates this perfectly. According to the index, in a typical week across those 20,000 products, Only about 2 to 4% of the inventory is actually marked down and discounted.
Which is a very counterintuitive finding.
Right, 2 to 4% seems so low.
It does. If you just look at the sheer volume of products on sale, you would assume prices in this market are incredibly rigid. 2 to 4% implies that the vast majority of products are trading at full retail value.
Right, but that leads into the depth of the cuts, because the data shows that when those 2 to 4% of products do go on sale, they receive massive price reductions.
We're talking deep cuts.
Typically between 30 and 55% off the list price.
Yes. Retailers are not doing across-the-board 10% discounts. They are utilizing highly concentrated deep cuts on specific SKUs.
Wait, if you take those targeted deep cuts and average them out across the entire market of 20,000 products, Velmes notes it creates an effective discount of 1 to 3% every single week.
Correct.
I'll be honest, an average drop of 1 to 3% sounds like a rounding error. Why is he making such a big deal out of 2%?
Well, it sounds small until you realize it is continuous and cumulative. Valmes calls this structural price compression.
Structural price compression.
Yes. It is an invisible weight constantly pushing the actual cost of goods down across the ecosystem.
Oh, I see.
If you are an analyst staring at the advertised list prices on a website, you would think prices have been perfectly flat since December 2025. You would assume margins are stable.
Because the sticker prices haven't budged.
Exactly. But that 1 to 3% weekly effective discount means the market is slowly bleeding margin to clear inventory. Those localized 55% cuts drag down the broader average, which indicates that supply is outpacing demand.
You completely miss the reality of the structural compression happening right under the surface if you ignore the effective price.
You miss the whole story.
That is a brilliant, albeit deceptive, strategy from the retailer's perspective. I mean, they remain highly competitive and clear their overstock without ever signaling to the broader market that their core brand value is dropping.
Precisely. But it means that without a tool calculating that post-discount checkout reality, you simply cannot understand the economics of the space.
Which brings up the historical context of all this. I am just amazed at how fragmented this analysis used to be.
It was essentially non-existent.
Right. Before a tool like this index came online, how did anyone, like investors, regulators, or even the retailers themselves, know what was actually happening in the market on a given Tuesday?
They largely didn't. This raises an important question about how we fundamentally measure market health in newly legalized or non-traditional sectors.
Because the old tools just don't apply.
Right. Before this index existed, stakeholders had to rely on lagging indicators. They would look at wholesale pricing reports, which only tell you what the retailers paid cultivators 3 to 6 months ago.
Which is ancient history in retail.
Exactly. It doesn't tell you what they're charging the end consumer today.
Or they would look at state tax revenue reports, which are famously delayed. By the time a state publishes its quarterly tax receipts, the market conditions that generated these receipts are totally gone.
Exactly. If a sudden oversupply of biomass crashes the market in January, but you are waiting on a Q1 tax report published in May, you are operating completely in the dark for a third of the year.
Wow.
You are trying to steer a ship by looking at the wake left behind you.
But the mechanics of this new index changed that entirely. It takes a comprehensive snapshot every single week.
It's a continuous time series.
It captures real-world pricing behavior as it happens. If there is a sudden supply glut of THC flower in a specific region and retailers start panic discounting to clear their vaults, this index catches it that exact week.
Right away.
It shows exactly how retailers are currently responding to supply, demand, and their local competitors.
And because the index categorizes everything so meticulously, separating out the CBD from the THC, the edibles from the hardware, it doesn't just show a generic blended market heartbeat.
It's granular.
It shows which specific limbs of the market are moving and why.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the data set reveals totally different behaviors depending on what category of product you're actually buying.
The category differences are huge.
Velmes highlights a massive divergence in the data between ancillary hardware, so like your vaporizers, batteries, and glass and consumable products, like the tinctures, edibles, and dry flower.
The divergence is stark, and it tells a fascinating story about supply chain physics. The index shows that ancillary hardware tends to be significantly more price stable.
You don't see the fire sales.
No, you simply do not see those wild, volatile 30 to 55% discount swings on a premium vaporizer battery that you see on an ounce of flour or a batch of dummies.
And Valmis explains exactly why that is in the interview. It comes down to the fundamental differences between manufactured goods and agricultural commodities.
It's a completely different life cycle.
Ancillary hardware has a predictable, traditional supply chain. It is built in a factory, often overseas, shipped over via standard freight, and it can sit on a shelf in a climate-controlled warehouse indefinitely.
A piece of consumer electronics doesn't have a ticking clock on its chemical composition. Furthermore, an empty vaporizer isn't subject to the intense, localized agricultural regulations that actual cannabis is. Consumables, at their core, are tied to the earth.
They're crops.
Yes. A crop of THC flower is subject to weather events, pest pressures, and harvest yields. Once it is processed into an edible or an oil, it has a strict expiration date.
It starts going bad.
The cannabinoids degrade over time, the terpenes evaporate, and the visual appeal diminishes.
Not to mention the regulatory exposure. State compliance laws mandate strict testing windows. A batch of flour might only be legally clear for sale for a certain number of months before it has to be retested or destroyed.
Precisely. And testing is expensive. So if a retailer is holding a massive amount of consumable inventory that is approaching either a physical degradation point or a regulatory expiration date, they cannot just leave the list price stable and hope for the best.
You have to move it.
They are legally and financially forced into liquidation events. They have to utilize those massive temporary discounts to clear the product before it becomes literally worthless.
It makes perfect sense when you lay it out like that. Hardware can wait out a slow market. It has holding power.
Right.
A plant-based consumable is a depreciating asset from the moment it is packaged, so the pricing strategy has to be incredibly fluid. But again, you only see that fluidity. You only see the forced liquidation if you have a data set aggressively trapping the actual checkout price week over week.
Which brings us to the underlying philosophy of Valmis's project. The stated goal of normalizing all this fragmented product information, matching up the baseline price, the specific discount depth, the product category, and the merchant into one consistent public data set, is to enforce transparency in a famously opaque industry.
Right. Who actually benefits from having the truth laid bare like this? Valmis outlines a few specific groups, and it really paints a picture of how vital open data is to a functioning ecosystem.
Let's start with the journalists and market reporters.
A great example.
In a rapidly evolving, highly localized, and often sensationalized market, reporters need empirical ground truth. Before this, they had to rely on anecdotal evidence, whispers from industry insiders, or curated PR spin from major brands claiming their margins were holding steady.
Now, a journalist can look at the time series and report definitively. They can say, actually, effective prices in the vape cartridge category dropped by a full 2% this month across the licensed ecosystem.
It holds the industry accountable to reality.
Then you have the researchers. Economists, sociologists, public policy experts, they finally have a clean, longitudinal data set to study market structure.
It's a goldmine for academia.
Valmis actually notes that the data set is even preserved on Zenodo, a major open-source academic database. The DOI is 10.5281 Zenodo, 0.18351089, so economists can access the raw numbers directly.
That is a massive resource for anyone trying to study the economics of a newly legal, hyper-competitive commodity market without having to pay tens of thousands of dollars to a private data broker.
It truly is. And of course, the industry participants themselves benefit. If you are a licensed merchant operating on razor-thin margins, you can use this public data to monitor your competitive positioning.
You can see the ongoing structural price compression happening in real time.
Yeah, if you notice that your competitors across state lines are aggressively discounting CBD oils this week, you can adjust your own purchasing and pricing strategy immediately, rather than waiting for a quarterly earnings report to realize you lost market share.
Transparency shifts the balance of power, but the most important beneficiary of that shift, and Valmis is very clear about this in the interview, is you, the consumer.
The person actually entering their credit card information online.
Absolutely. When the mechanisms of pricing are obscured, the retailer holds all the leverage, they control the narrative.
But when you have true pricing transparency, you are no longer a victim of the fake sale illusion. You can look at the macro market trends and understand if a 30% discount on a tincture is actually a rare, incredible deal worth jumping on, or if that is just the standard structural discount required to move that specific category of aging product this week.
You can make truly informed decisions based on the actual clearing value of the good, rather than falling for the psychological trickery of an inflated list price.
It allows the consumer to navigate the market with the same level of sophistication as the retailers themselves.
Yes, it levels the playing field.
So what does this all mean? We take all these thousands of tracked products, all these weekly data snapshots since December 2025, and all these deep dives into effective versus list pricing. The ultimate takeaway from Valmus and the Cannabis Deals U.S. Price Index is that this market is maturing rapidly.
Very rapidly.
It is highly competitive, fiercely protective of its margins, and battling complex supply chain realities. And the persistent, ongoing price compression they have tracked proves that pricing, specifically the effective post-discount pricing, is the absolute clearest signal of market health.
It cuts through the marketing noise and shows you the actual physics of the industry at work.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, let me rephrase.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this index is a masterclass in market economics that applies far beyond just cannabis.
Oh, absolutely.
When prices compress in real time, week after week, through targeted sales rather than baseline cuts, it is a direct reflection of underlying supply pressure, inventory bloat, and subtle shifts in consumer demand.
It's all connected.
The stable list prices are merely a facade designed to hide those underlying operational realities from the casual observer. The index simply forces those realities into the light.
It is a fascinating look behind the retail curtain. And if you are curious to see the weekly updates, dive into the methodology of how they scrape the data, or even explore the full categorized data set for yourself, you can find all of it directly at cannabisdealsus.com.
It is rare to see such a deliberate open-source effort to pull back the curtain on retail mechanics, especially in an industry that has historically been forced to operate in the shadows.
It really is, and it's a testament to how far the space has come. And it leaves me with one final thought, something for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
I love these.
We just spent this entire deep dive looking at how retailers in a highly regulated, rapidly maturing market rely heavily on the illusion of stable list prices, all while secretly driving competition through massive targeted structural discounts.
Right.
It makes you wonder how much of the pricing in other areas of your daily life is following this exact same playbook.
That is a great question.
From the groceries you buy at the supermarket, to the software subscriptions you use for work, to the clothes hanging in your closet. How much of what you pay is actually driven by hidden structural discounting rather than the true inherent value of the item?
It really makes you rethink every purchase.
It does. The next time you see a bright red sales sticker and feel that little rush of victory, ask yourself, is the price of the product actually going down, or is the illusion of the list price just temporarily fading?